Introducing Treaty Number 6. What are the key dates and places?
In 1871, indigenous people of the plains, concerned about dwindling bison and land loss, sought a treaty, so negotiations began after Cree halted surveyors in Saskatchewan in 1875, asserting that trespassing would not be allowed. And on July 27, 1876, the Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba in the Northwest Territories traveled from Ottawa to Fort Carleton, arriving on August 15th to meet Cree chiefs. The rest of the band joined 3 days later, and after discussions, an agreement was reached on August 23rd. The Carleton band signed first, with Duck Lake joining 4 days later. The treaty moved to Fort Pitt on September 5th, and here Chief Sweetgrass assured bands of its benefits despite the obvious drawbacks. Him and surrounding bands signed on September 9th. Other chiefs initially opposed later signed to protect their land, including Menahikosis on July 1879 and Mistihimwashqua on December 8, 1882 at Fort Walsh. Today, the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations was formed in 1993, and Edmonton established a recognition day in 2013.
Who are the parties involved?
In regards to the parties involved, while negotiating Treaty Number 6, we have two major groups, Her Majesty the Queen and the Plain and Wood Cree Indians and other Indian tribes. It concluded near Fort Carleton after having some meetings at Fort Pitt and Battle River. Representing the Queen's side, we have three figures. They were all commissioners, and the first figure is the Honorable Alexander Morris, who was a Lieutenant Governor of the province of Manitoba and the Northwest Territories. Second person is the Honorable James Mackay, and the last one is the Honorable William Joseph Christie. From the Indian side, as mentioned before, we had the Plain and Wood Cree, among other Indian tribes.
What is the context?
Context was the Plains indigenous people, which included the Siksika, Cree, Ojibwe, Nakota, and Dakota nations, wanted to maintain their freedom and independence as they were worried about settlers coming over and taking away their land. As they heard of treaties being signed in other nations across Canada, they too wanted to sign a treaty in hopes that their land and resources would be protected. An important example of their resources is the bison. The bison population was decreasing, and this worried indigenous groups as they relied on the bison for food and clothing. Losing the bison would mean risking malnourishment. The political context was that the Canadian government wanted to expand further into the West and obtain more land for settlement. They believed that creating treaties was a way to gain access and develop land on the West. They wanted to use the land that Indigenous people lived on for industrialization and white settlement. The historical context was that in 1875, a Cree community faced treaty negotiations led by Lieutenant Governor Alexander Morris. While some leaders like Pitakuahana Piwin opposed the treaty fearing loss of land, Chiefs Mista Wasis and Atakakup supported it. The treaty was signed on August 23, 1875, and later at Fort Pitt, Chief Mista Himasqua Big Bear was skeptical of treaty's promises, but ultimately signed it on September 9, 1875, despite concerns about past treaty failures.
How does it impact the health and well-being of Indigenous peoples?
The health and well-being of Indigenous peoples within Treaty 6 can be impacted by the unfulfilled promises of treaties and various factors in one's life, which can include, but is not limited to, accessibility, addiction, education, environment, poverty, social dimensions, and trauma. In order to address the historical injustices relating to treaty agreement, recognizing Indigenous rights is crucial. In the picture provided on the left, you can see an overview of the interconnectedness between the determinants of health in all aspects of life. It thoroughly depicts how important holistic values are to an Indigenous person's health and well-being. The treaty right to health is written or becomes a part of the oral promises in the numbered treaties. There are essentially three categories to this table, which include the implied commitments, verbal commitments, and the medicine chest clause. Treaty 6 is unique because it's the only treaty that includes a written medicine chest clause. It is a clause that stipulates the promise of a medicine chest to be kept at the house of each Indian agent for the use and benefit of the Indians, or what we would now call in present time, access to medical care, services, and supplies. Therefore, Treaty 6 still has impacts on the health and well-being of Indigenous peoples due to their inclusion of the written medicine chest clause, which remains controversial. Aside from the controversy, treaties play an immense role in determining access to healthcare, resources, and quality of life within Indigenous communities.
What are the ongoing impacts?
To know about the ongoing impacts of Treaty 6, some information on what led to the disputes of the present should be stated. When Aboriginal people signed Treaty 6, they presumed the land would be shared. They were not informed they would have to give up the land. This misconception, due to the difference in culture and the deliberate ambiguity created by the treaty commissioners, has caused Aboriginal people to file lawsuits till this day. Aboriginal people of today are put into reserves, and the promised medical attention, education, and agricultural help written in Treaty 6 by the government are not being met. In 2008, the Beaver Lake Cree Nation filed a lawsuit against the provincial and federal government of Canada, claiming to have their Treaty 6 rights infringed. Due to the fact Canada has allowed its industrial industries to freely develop, it has caused the Beaver Lake Cree Nation's waters to be polluted, and many of the animals died due to it. Tensions are still there between the Aboriginal people and the government even after the treaty was signed, due to the fact that the government does not hold their end in the treaty.
References. Thank you for watching.